Welcome to Westminster Watch with me, Nick de Bois. The UK will be one of around 60 countries to hold elections in 2024, something that's led to it being billed the most democratic in history. Almost half of the world's eligible voters will be able to go to the polls, but it's an unfortunate fact that some votes will matter more than others, with some contests on a knife edge and others a fait accompli. More than 60 countries, an estimated 4 billion voters, 2024 is set to be the biggest election year in history. But does the sheer number of elections mean our global democracy is alive and well? Or is it more under threat than ever before? While in some countries, such as Iceland, elections are predicted to be free and fair, in others, such as North Korea, the result will be a formality. These will be the first elections since AI tools have gone mainstream. Social media companies are already struggling to moderate political content, and with deepfakes and disinformation already spreading, experts say we're not ready for how powerful AI already is. 9 European nations are electing new governments, and voters will also choose a new EU parliament. In South Africa, the ANC faces the prospect of defeat for the first time since the end of apartheid. Bangladesh's main opposition party has already boycotted the first election of the year, claiming the vote would be rigged. In Indonesia and India, there are complaints that democratically elected leaders have become more autocratic while in office. And in one of the final elections of the year, in the US, democracy too appears to be on the ballot. Should he win, Donald Trump has threatened to weaponize democratic institutions against his political rivals, something he believes has been done to him already. The US election is set to take place in November. And it appears voters in the UK will be going to the polls at around the same time. After more than a decade in power, the Conservatives look destined for a spell in opposition. In his first speech of the year, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said a vote for Labour would take the country back to square one. But opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party will bring much-needed change for Britain.
The thought of millions of people right across our country putting a cross on that ballot paper. It's what we've been waiting for, preparing for, fighting for, a year of choice, a chance to change Britain, a clock that is ticking on this government.
But it's not just Labour the Tories have to watch out for. Reform UK could split the Conservative vote. In its previous guise as the Brexit Party, it contested nearly 300 seats in the 2019 election. They stood aside in constituencies the Conservatives held in order to help the Tories win a majority. This time round, however, they have pledged not to do that. Joining me now to discuss this and many other issues is Reform UK's leader, Richard Tice. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Well, earlier this year, let's get straight to the heart of it, you said that your job is to smash the Tories and destroy them at the next election. Now, given that you are polling sufficiently to cost them seats, isn't the reality, though, that whilst you may not win seats, that you will be saying, vote reform, get Keir Starmer, a man who stands for everything that you do not?
No, listen, let's be very clear. We're saying that there are two sides of the same socialist coin. Both of the two main parties, whether it's the Tories who've broken Britain or whether it's what I call Starmageddon, who will bankrupt Britain, the country needs to wake up and realise what we're facing. Because under both of those regimes, we've got record high taxes, and Starmer wants higher taxes. We've got record levels of government spending, far too much of it sadly wasteful. We haven't taken advantage of Brexit. Starmer wants to take us closer to the EU. And they're both obsessed by the job-destroying, vast, trillion-plus cost of net zero. And there's no economic growth, and you cannot grow an economy on that basis. And that means that actually everybody's getting poorer because of the other huge issue, which is mass immigration that no one voted for. So they're both a disaster. Democracy works better when people have got a broader range of choices to look at and to vote for. And here's the thing. You have to punish failure by the likes we've seen under the Tories. They've got to be punished, and our view is they've got to be ousted. And this idea that, well, you want people to vote out of fear. We've been that, they've done that. We stood aside for them back in 2019. They've blown it, they've messed up, they need to be ousted.
But Richard, the reality is that on current polling, and even if you actually polled even higher under our political system, you could achieve your objective to smash the Tories, to punish the Tories.
But you're assuming this is a one-term thing. It's not. This is a medium-term project to save Britain. The country's in a terrible state.
So fine, an interim position.
This is part of a journey.
But you get Keir Starmer in the meantime. He stands for everything that you do not.
As does Richard Sunak now, because he's also a socialist.
Does he really? He believes in growth?
No.
You believe in growth?
I believe in growth. I'm the only one who does believe in growth. Rishi Sunak, he's raised taxes to the highest level possible. He hasn't deregulated as he promised under Brexit. That's the great Brexit opportunity. Everything that Sunak has done is a form of socialism. It's a disaster. There's no growth. And without growth, people get poorer.
But without political reform, you can do nothing about it.
And that's what we stand for. You've just admitted it's in the name.
You've just actually said, fine, if your mission is reform, all right, you're saying in the meantime, the price is to elect a man and a party that literally oppose vigorously everything you do. There's common ground between you and the Conservatives.
The common ground is that the majority of the Labour Party wants proportional representation, as do all the
It's not in their manifesto, you know that.
But they voted for it in a conference, and there's a huge amount of work going on, and I think we'll have proportional representation within the next electoral cycle. This is a medium-term project. Rome's not built in a day. The country needs reform. The country needs saving. You know, all your viewers know, the country's in a terrible state. The place is broken, and it's very nearly bankrupt. And if we keep going down this path, we are in deep, deep trouble.
If you reduce the Conservatives to, say, 100 seats, you will not win any, maybe in your opinion, but you will not win any seats under the current parliamentary system. Let me finish this point. No, let me finish this point. What will actually happen is you'll ensure a huge Labour majority, and the last time Labour MPs voted on a form of proportional representation in 2012, they overwhelmingly rejected it. What chance have you got of earning reform that way?
You're completely wrong, Nick. They just, in 2 conferences ago, the Labour Party voted to bring in proportional representation. Senior figures want PR. The country wants PR. If we had a referendum on PR, we'd win it 70-30. I've no doubt at all. This is a medium-term project. And this idea that you have to vote out of fear of the alternative. No, I want people to vote optimistically, positively, for the right policies to save Britain. And the more millions that vote for us, then we will get MPs. Yes, we all know it's difficult, but just because something's difficult doesn't mean you should get on with it and do it.
Well, are you making it more difficult yourself? Because the chief concerns of most generations, apart from perhaps the baby boomers, the people of my age group, if you like, their concerns are not about the intrusion and an overbearing state interfering in their lives. They're not about uncompetitive tax rates. They're not even bothered about union militancy, things that you've been talking about in your manifesto and in your speeches. They are concerned about their prospects of housing. They are concerned about their prospects of affordability, actually learning to live under these difficult times with the money they've got.
Which is why, if you look at the cost of living crisis, our key economic policy of lifting the starting point at which anybody pays any income tax to £20,000 from £12,500, that's about an extra net £30 a week in everybody's pay packet. 6 million people would pay no income tax whatsoever. That is the fastest way to helping people resolve the cost of living crisis. Immigration is a huge issue, and the mass immigration
is immigration.
It is a huge issue, and I'll tell you why it is. Firstly, it's polling number 1 or 2 on people's
No, it's
minds.
not. It's 4. The latest poll. No, YouGov have it at the 4th issue. behind health, which leads the way, followed by the economy, and then, curiously, cost of living, which is, if you like, 2 and 3.
That's the same thing.
But it's fourth, 22%
it's in the top three
people.
Yeah, it's in the top 3, but everybody knows that no one voted for mass immigration, and a huge population boom impacts on everything. It impacts on housing, rents, prices. It impacts on the public services, the availability of things. And the quality of public services has deteriorated as we've had mass immigration. So people are now joining the dots and saying, actually, yeah, and what we've got is a range of policies that will actually save Britain. For example, on immigration, we would freeze non-essential immigration, 1 in, 1 out. And we're the only party with a credible plan that will stop the
That still
boats.
means, on current figures, about 500,000 migration into this country.
No, it doesn't.
Is that,
It means
are you
a net
comfortable
zero.
with that?
It means a net zero because about 450,000 on a long-term average leave the country every year. So if you welcome smart immigration for the skills you need to a similar number, the net change is 0. It's the only net zero we want.
But you're actually, we'll come on to green policies if we have time, but you're actually still saying we will welcome 500,000 people into this country. Let's be clear about that.
Absolutely, of the skills that we genuinely need, but that's a maximum based on the number of people who are also leaving the country for whatever reason.
And illegal immigration. Rishi Sunak can rightly point to the fact that whilst it's got absurdly high under the Conservative watch, he's knocked off 1/3. Your policy is, let's stop the boats. We don't know much more about it, apart from the fact you want to stop the boats.
You clearly haven't been doing your research, because it's all over social media. We have a clear 6-point plan to stop the boats. Sunak said by December 23 he would stop the boats. He's absolutely failed. He's incompetent. He won't do the right thing. It's all come out now. Our 6-point plan...
So in a nutshell, how will you do it?
In a nutshell, you've got to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. You've got to declare a national security threat. You only process people in offshore or process them very rapidly here. You've got to make it clear no one is allowed to settle here. You've got to have a new Department of Immigration.
Yeah, but you've got to make it clear no one's allowed to settle here.
You've asked me a question,
the Tories are doing that.
No, they're not doing it.
The Tories have made it clear no one's allowed to settle here illegally. They've even changed the law.
Let me finish the 6th and most crucial point. You've got to do what Australians did. You need to pick up and safely take back to France, which we're allowed to do under international law. That stops the business model. It's stopped in Australia. We're the only people with the courage, the bravery and the political leadership to get this done. And that's why we're going up in the polls. I've absolutely no doubt.
Let's talk about leadership, shall we? Nigel Farage, on the one hand, he's dancing with the Tories at their conference. On the other, he's dining with Reform and courting both people, it seems. He's not letting anyone in on his plans for the future. The longer he prevaricates about a return to politics, that undermines your leadership, doesn't it? You're vulnerable so long as he's out there, nibbling away at the sidelines, keeping us all hanging on a thread as to what he's going to do.
Completely the opposite. The more that Nigel is thinking about whether or not he can and can't come back into mainstream politics, the more people are talking about it. He's doing a fantastic job because everybody's hearing Reform. Who are they? Oh, I like their policies. That's why we're going up in the polls. So I'm delighted. This is a big job to save the country because we are in dire straits. And that's why the more help he can give, the better. And I think we're going up in the polls. If Nigel comes back, that will assist. And that's great.
How would you have him back in the party?
There's a variety
would you stand
of ways.
aside for him?
There's a variety of ways. He's currently honorary president. He did a brilliant job as an undercover spy in full sight at the Tory conference. And look, whether he comes back as president or chairman or
leader.
It doesn't... Look, the point is, you all obsess about titles. We obsess about actually saving Britain.
Well, every party has to have a leader, Richard.
Yeah,
so would he replace him and would you step aside for him?
Nigel's got to work out how much time he wants to give, what he wants to do. I think it's highly unlikely he's going to sit on the sidelines. So look, but as you say, you're obsessed by titles. I'm focused on action.
I think I'm obsessed by leadership, and you can't. If you're obsessed by
leadership,
delivery, you have to have a leader.
Leadership is not about a title. Leadership is about political courage to tell it as it is, to bring a nation with you. If
Joint leadership.
It could be a variety of these. You see, you obsess about the title. I'm focused on leadership, the courage,
You're
the
obsessed
action.
about delivery and political will.
And that's
has
what
to
the
have
people
a leader.
want, because
look at
the
country's
sick of the absolute failures.
Well, look at the last party that had 2 leaders. The SDP,
party, the Tory party.
The SDP had 2 leaders and it fell apart. It got nowhere.
And the Tory party had 3 leaders in the space of about 12 months, and the place is in a catastrophic disaster.
So, to be clear, because you've been very generous with your answers, would you step aside for Nigel Farage if he wanted to take the helm of leadership in your party?
Let's wait and see how much time he wants to give it. But the more help he can give, the better. And for me, it's not precious about a title. It's actually focusing on saving this country from the shocking state we're in. And it requires some courage, it requires leadership, and it requires frankly, a lot of help. This is not a one-person job. Be under no illusion. This is difficult, thanks to the Tories' utter way they've broken this country.
Richard Tice, you're certainly not lacking the passion or the political will. Thank you very much for joining us here today on Westminster Watch. The first polls of the year make grim viewing for Rishi Sunak, despite warning that a vote for Labour would take the UK back to square one. YouGov polls show 46% of the public seem to see that as a step forwards. Just 22% of people would vote Tory, down 2% from the festive period. Joining me now are Head of News at the News Movement, Rebecca Hutson, and the man who was Michael Gove's special advisor at the Cabinet Office and various government departments, Charlie Rowley. Welcome to you both. Well, I want to get your reaction to the interview with Richard Tice, leader of Reform. Reform are clearly going to do some damage as the polls stand, Charlie, to the Conservatives. Predictions say it could cost them 20, 30 seats. Who knows? But it's definitely not a good place for the Conservatives to be in. Are Reform the final nail in the slow death of the Conservative Party?
No, they're not. And the reason for that is because as that brilliant interview that you did with Richard, brought out was the fact that a vote for reform is effectively letting Labour in through the back door. You know, the Tory party will come forward with a series of manifesto commitments to cut tax. It's going to do that in the budget in March anyway, in just a couple of months' time. It will be a very, very good campaign to state that it's dealt with some of the immigration problems that we have in this country, the small boat crossings that we see that, yes, are problematic for the UK and for local communities. That's down by a third. Hopefully that can come down even further. There's the returns agreement with Albania. There's more money that's gone into Border Patrol, processing the backlog of claims.
But that's not registering yet with the public, is it? And I suppose, Becca, the point about reform is if you're angry with the Conservatives, you feel let down on the key issue of immigration. It's very easy to give them the Tories a kicking by voting reform. Labour, however, are not in their sights yet, but he says Starmageddon. He doesn't like Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. Are they a threat to Labour as well?
No, I don't think they're a threat to Labour. I think they're a bit of a gift to Labour because I think, if you are a disenfranchised, frustrated Conservative voter who is going to the polls thinking about immigration, and I actually don't think that is what's going to motivate a lot of voters when we come to the election. I think, it's about the economy, stupid, and it's about the NHS, and increasingly I think it's about the standards of schooling that's motivating people. I think immigration is something we talk about a lot. But so I think if you're frustrated about that, sure, you've got a nice kind of red meaty, canapé being served up to you by reform. But I think for Labour, anything that kind of nibbles away at that Tory vote is a good thing. And I don't think any disenfranchised or frustrated or slightly homeless feeling Labour voter is looking at Richard Tice and thinking that that's someone that they're kind of going to get into bed with.
Nigel Farage coming back to reform, whether it's a leader or whatever, I couldn't quite work it out. But good thing or bad thing for the Conservatives?
Well, I think the one thing for Nigel is if he does come back as the leader of Reform, I think he'll have to put his money where his mouth is and stand as an MP. He'll have to be on the ballot. I think it would be incomprehensible to say that I'm coming back to, lead the country through all the problems that we've got and you should vote Reform, but actually I can't, be the one to be in Parliament and not give constituents a choice.
Why shouldn't he do that?
Well, I think he should, but I don't think he will. He stood 8 times before, and it's an 8 times he's lost out because the public don't actually agree with fringe parties. They know that at the end of the day, it'll either be Sir Keir Starmer that's the Prime Minister or Rishi Sunak, and out of those two chaps, who's going to be the one that can grapple with the country's problems and get on to deliver? And that will be the choice that the British public have to face.
Well, let's look at that choice. I have to start with you, I'm afraid, Charlie, because basically, when the governing political party talks about having 5 families, or as others might say, 5 factions, on the right wing of that party, that's before you even consider left of centre Conservatives, how could you ever coalesce that party? Put your special advisor hat, coalesce your party to get behind a manifesto that they all agree on, let alone governing?
Well, I think Tory MPs will have to come together to recognise that, OK, I might want as much as possibly can in terms of immigration, but you can compromise to make sure that you have a good set of policies on immigration, a good set of policies on housing, a good set of policies. Don't make perfect the enemy of the good to go to the country as a united party, because that's the only way that you're going to win a general election.
And the last person who used that phrase was, of course, Theresa May, Prime Minister, and it didn't end too well there. But your optimism is noted. But Becca, Rishi Sunak, about 4 months ago, actually 3 months ago, he was the change candidate. Now, he's no longer the change candidate. He's actually saying, stick with me because things are getting better and all the risk lies with Keir Starmer. And that risk is quite a tempting appetite for the voter to think, you know what, I don't like the Tories, but it's getting better.
I think he was a change candidate for the duration of his conference speech, wasn't he? And then he ended up reappointing David Cameron, who I don't remember being. That's a huge divorce from the past, is it? They aren't going to win the change argument from pure logistics, are they? You know, they've been in government for 13 years, and he's been a part of it for a huge amount of. He's been part of it for a huge amount of time. So I think, you know, hopey changey stuff is not going to be something that Rishi Sunak is going to land. And I don't think for most people things do feel like they're getting any better. You know, people are still suffering from a cost of living crisis. People are increasingly concerned about a lack of solution to the immigration crisis. We've seen, you know, a huge degradation in the standards of our schooling. We have an NHS backlog that feels unsurmountable. We've got junior doctors on strike. I don't think for the everyday voter it does feel like things are getting better. And what they do have over, you know, on the other side of the house is a kind of pretty, you know, calm, in control guy who's got some quite boring policy points that probably is going to make their lives a bit better and put a bit more money in their pocket.
It's interesting.
And that's quite appealing.
I mean, as we sit here today and this week, Keir Starmer seems to be fighting on the nanny state. Now, he's put forward this idea that government should do more, including supervising the brushing of teeth. Is that really what was going to entice voters to back Labour?
Well, I think he's happy to have the fight about the nanny state phrase, isn't he? And I think, rightly so, if we have got children who are emerging from home, going into the school system, and they can't do basic things like brush their teeth, go to the loo, they've got, you know, pretty poor, you know, grasp of how to speak, kind of like I do sometimes. You know, absolutely, we need a system, we need a body to step in and support.
It's interesting,
though. Write off a generation of children.
I mean, Becca has a point that, however instinctively Conservatives might not like the idea of nanny government knows best, the fact of the matter is we have an appalling record on healthcare for kids on their teeth. Maybe it's time to try something else.
Well, I remember Sir Keir Starmer at the start of the year said that his politics would be slightly like touch politics on people's lives. So the fact that he's now referring back to the nanny state shows just another U-turn from the Labour leader.
But he's embracing it, isn't he?
But I think there comes a point where you have to say, you know, what are the fundamental issues that this country faces? It is still about the economy, stupid, as you absolutely rightly said. It is about those backlogs in the NHS. It is about immigration that matters to people, particularly in the red wall seats, particularly that voted for Conservatives for the first time because they left Labour, because Labour had left them behind. Those are the key structural issues that this country faces. It is for parents and individuals to take responsibility over kids.
All right, let me pick up on that, because I mean, it's a perfectly valid point. But are we now not living, unlike in the era of Margaret Thatcher, we're now seen to be living in the era when people are saying, what are the government going to do about it? Listen to this from the Social Market Foundation in September 23. 65% say ban advertising exposing children to alcohol. 56% support price regulation. 75% think the government has done too little on obesity. We're in the era of big state then. Isn't this a gift for Labour? And that's why Keir Starmer's taking it on.
Well, I think it's a huge risk because, you know, and on the back of COVID, obviously, it was the government that was dictating a lot of rules that the country had to follow. And people, you know, polling suggested that people liked the rules. They liked being told what to do. But the reality is that they actually didn't. So I think, you know, when you're seeing issues like the blood infected inquiry in the NHS, that was a big government organisation, the NHS telling people that those blood products were absolutely safe. We're seeing in the post office at the minute that huge scandal that's been unearthed. This is a government agency.
Fair point. Just for time reasons only. Becca, I want to bring you in. Are we going to hear more about the nanny state from Labour? Because that seems to be the sense of travel.
Well, I think nanny state is kind of working quite hard here, isn't it? I think what we're talking about in that specific instance is the fact that the majority of the number one reason that kids are in A&E between 6 and 10 in this country is because they've got terrible teeth. It's to do with the state of their teeth. So it's a very specific policy about trying to prevent that. And, you know, looking at the health of our children are shorter, fatter and less healthy than they've ever been. And so this is about investing in the next generation of kids, because otherwise everyone's policies are just about looking after boomers, house owners, and, you know, kind of the much older electorate, whereas these are policies are actually going to galvanise young families, parents, people who maybe want to be parents one day. You know, this is looking at addressing an electorate more broadly, which is important.
We're going to have to see which of you is right as that pans out. Becca Hutson, thank you very much indeed. Charlie Rowley, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Indeed, to all my guests, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more lively debate and conversation. Just type in Westminster Watch. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.